Hello and welcome to Pop Culture Point Counterpoint. I'm your host Chris Bowser. Today I'm going to be doing a review of Moon Knight #1. Came out in March 2014. If you're not aware of who Moon Knight is, I will go over a quick overview of him. Moon Knight was first created in 1975 in a comic book called Werewolf by Night. He then went and got his own series and was mildly successful throughout the 70s and 80s. However, in the 90s, he kind of went downhill and then became his own entity and went away. He came back in 2006 with Charlie Hudson's version of him, which was just amazing in my opinion. I have the entire run in trade back, and it really made me a big fan of Moon Knight in general. Now, since then, he's gone through a couple of different incarnations. Vengeance of the Moon Knight, which kind of brought him back to New York. I didn't like it. I wasn't a big fan. He was one of the founding members, aka recruited by Captain America, to be in the Secret Avengers. Then he went to Los Angeles in order to do some work there in the 2011 reboot. They did 12 issues of that. It was written okay, not great. His multiple personality disorder kind of got in the way and reinvented itself in a weird way, but it wasn't bad. It's worth a read. But let's talk about the comic book at hand. Moon Knight #1 in the all-new Marvel Now series. The cover, it's pretty basic, shows Moon Knight with a crescent moon on his forehead. Nothing too outstanding. It's worth noting that this is written by Warren Ellis, who we may have seen previously, if you pay attention to comic books, on Red, which has become the major motion picture starring Bruce Willis. He also did a run on Ultimate Fantastic Four, which first brought in Doctor Doom and the Negative Zone into the Ultimate Universe. He then wrote the extremely successful and turned into a major motion picture Iron Man Extremis. Iron Man 3 was loosely based on the Extremis comic book. The artwork is done by Declan Shalvey, which I'm sure I butchered his name. If you're listening to this, I'm sorry about that. He did the penciling, and you'll know him for the black and white comic book Hero Killers. He did some work on Deadpool and Thunderbolts recently. He's relatively unknown, but the artwork in this, I'll get into it later, he does a good job. The coloring is done by Jordie Bellaire. She's done some work on Captain Marvel, Deadpool, and Venom. Once again, I'll get into it a little bit later, but really, the artwork in this is very well done. The first two pages of Moon Knight #1 are a basic recap on what we've already seen in the past couple of runs. It goes over and explains that Moon Knight has multiple personality disorder, or what they're calling DID, dissociative identity disorder. They go through his backstory, stating that he's a mercenary who was killed doing the first good thing in his life in Khonshu, the Egyptian god of vengeance, who happened to be searching for an avatar at the time. He regave him life, and he donned a hooded cloak and decided to take all of them guys who killed him down. Came back to New York as a superhero. It also utilizes one line that I've always enjoyed in all forms of Moon Knight, which is he wears white, not because it's something that someone will wear during the night in order to conceal themselves. No, he likes it when people see him coming. It's a nice little, in my opinion, it's kind of a little jab at the ribs of Batman. Like, ooh, stealth is all great and whatnot, but it takes a real badass to just let them know that you're on the way. After that, it goes into the story that we have, which shows us some of his new tech and goes into his new costume. Now, the way that they're doing the artwork in this is that they're not coloring Moon Knight at all. Instead, it is just white, head to toe white, with different pencilings of black in there. The rest of the world around him is colored, but the white really stands out. The artwork in this is just astonishing. Honestly, the style is perfect for Moon Knight. Everything is penciled really well. The colors are all done like there's light coming from all sorts of different directions, and actual light coming from the light sources that they provide and show in the comic. I did some research on the penciler and the colorist, and I was really surprised when I found out that neither of them had done horror comic books before, because this comic book looks just like a horror comic. And for a guy who got to start fighting werewolves and deals with some unsavory supernatural style of characters, the art styling works really, really well. It goes into the actual fighting, the storyline that goes on throughout this comic book, but that's all pretty minor in the idea that we're just kind of getting reintroduced to the character. The villain or bad guy that he fights in this, I'm not overly impressed with, but since they don't even give him a name, it's not really supposed to be anything more than just a, hey, here's some guy that he can fight, and although he is outmatched, he can outsmart him. It kind of goes into the detective side of Moon Knight, which a lot of people say that Moon Knight is just a basic takeoff of Batman. Yes, to a certain degree, with the idea that he is in fact just a human who has training, who uses gadgets. But Moon Knight's a little bit more than that. Yes, he is wealthy also, but he doesn't necessarily fight crime to avenge the murder of his parents. Instead, he just kind of beats up whoever has it coming to him. And the whole Egyptian god thing is a pretty awesome little twist on that too. All in all, I think this comic's really good in a new way to bring Moon Knight out. I'm glad that with the Marvel Now, they decided that Moon Knight is important enough to come out with his own comic book. I was really worried for a while there that they wouldn't bring him back, especially with the unsuccessful 2011 reboot that only lasted 12 issues. Even if this only goes 1 year, although I hope it goes longer, I would still be happy with it. Because it's obvious that the people who are writing it and coloring it and penciling it know what they're doing. The artwork, astonishing. The storyline, basic, but does really well for what Moon Knight is. All in all, I'd rate this a 9 out of 10. Alright, thank you for listening to Pop Culture Point Counterpoint. If you like what you see or heard, go ahead and subscribe to us here on YouTube. Or shoot over and check out our podcast link, which is right down there. Or, if you want to read, I don't know why people would, but if you do, go ahead and check out our blog. It's right here. Me and Alex do a lot of stuff on there. Or, go through, click through our Amazon banner and whatnot. Alright, thank you for listening, and as always, I've died before. It was boring, so I stood up.